Yes.
We are very pleased to have you here. Gabriele is a professor from the University of Hamburg, and she's a very well-known researcher in mathematics education, editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Mathematics Education, el ZDM, published by Springer. She is organizing the 13th International Congress of Mathematics Education, the May 13th. This will be University of Hamburg. So there will be from Chilean there. Research includes the teaching and learning of mathematical applications, international comparative studies, gender and cultural aspects in mathematics education, as well as professional knowledge of teaching and teacher education. It's a pleasure to have Gabriele Kaiser. We'll talk about professional knowledge of mathematics, its structure and development. So,
yes, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I'm very pleased and honored that I have the chance to present, yes, parts of my research of the last few years over here. And as already said, I will try to speak as slowly as possible. If I'm getting too fast, simply raise your hands. And afterwards, I hope we have some time for discussion. Patricia or Macarena will be happy to translate any questions from Spanish into English, because unfortunately I don't speak any Spanish. I have thought maybe after ICME 13 I should have a go. So, I will, as already Patricia said so nicely, will talk about the professional knowledge of mathematics teachers, its structure and development. And you have seen over here, I have put a few names over there, because it's not only, it's a big file or of work we have done in the last few years, and it's not only me. I should especially mention Sigrid Blömig, who is really a very strong operator. So, I mean, I don't think I need to emphasize it strongly, but you all know about this, that the discussion about the inefficiency of teacher education has a very long tradition. I mean, already Felix Klein mentioned that in his very famous book, Elementary Mathematics from an Advanced Standpoint, in 1905. And if we look at more recent discussion, we see that Lorty said in 1975, teacher education is a low-impact enterprise. Richardson said in 1996, teacher education is a weak intervention compared to the own school experience and later professional development. And Zeichner and Tabachnik said in 1981, everything teachers have learned during their teacher education seems to be washed out by school experience. So you see that's a whole bunch of critique about the inefficiency of teacher education already described 30 years ago, and as said already longer. In the last decade there has been some studies around in order to explore the efficiency of teacher education. And I would like to refer to a very extensive overview by Sigrid Blömig and June Delaney in ZDM, published in 2012. It was the 3rd issue, and there they have described very extensively the knowledge known at this time, and of course, and then they made the connection to achievements or to international comparative studies on the students' achievement, that means PISA and TIMSS, which has influenced very strongly this discussion about the inefficiency or efficiency of teacher education. So, the question arises, and I hope I can share a little bit about what we know so far with you. how effective is teacher education? That means how far universities succeed in the development of the professional knowledge of future mathematics teachers. I mean, that is an important question for all of us. And we really need to get strong empirical evidence on this question of the efficiency of teacher education. So, with a question by and Sebastian Linares, I think he was 2010, 3 trends on education, and they said the first trend is the increasing attention to the social dimension of teacher education. That means everything concerning collaborative learning, teacher inquiry groups, communities of practice, especially this word community is very famous if you think about the work of Barbara Jaworski and others. The second trend is the focus on teachers' reflective practice. That means teachers noticing within teaching, and of course everything concerning the change of practice. The third trend is the increasing attention to the general conditions of teacher education. It means question, how is teacher education structured? What is the institutional setting? And what working conditions teachers have, for example, in East Asia or, for example, in South America. So, and they argue that it is necessary to take these 3 strands seriously and regarding them as challenges for the future. And they continue that more external and quantitative research are needed, in particular looking at the outcomes of different types of teacher education or at longitudinal studies of mathematics teachers' learning and career. And I've especially chosen these 2 researchers because they are not the persons who are calling for quantitative research all the time. It means it's really their strong feeling now it's time for quantitative large-scale studies. So, and in addition, it's necessary to take a cultural perspective. We can simply not say that we can compare teacher education in Europe with teacher education in South America or in East Asia. So if we look at these large international comparative studies on the students' achievements, it's usually the case that the Western students are outperformed by the East Asian students. And that is now a tendency which started already 40 years ago with the Japanese students, and it has now continued in the last 30 years. So, and that of course has led to the question which Frederick Leung and Quinby Park asked, whether the competence of the East Asian students can be attributed at least partly to the competence of their teachers. I mean, that is of course something you would expect. If you had good teachers, you have good student achievements, and of course afterwards the students with these good achievements go afterwards into teacher education and produce good teachers and produce afterwards good student achievements. So this vicious cycle they are mentioning, and I think we need to think about that really intensively. So, we have now 2 more detailed questions from different perspectives. So, how effective are different educational systems on teachers? And to what extent do country-specific differences exist? We should not say that we simply can compare one country with another. So, that is the whole background which really then gave reasons in 2008 for the International Association for the Evaluation of Educational Achievement, the IEA, to implement an international comparative study on the efficiency of teacher education at primary or on lower secondary level. That is the so-called education and development study. You teach mathematics, reviewed TETS-M, and this study is actually, and one follow-up study will be the core of my talk. And I will go into more detail tomorrow morning when I describe in more detail the results of TETS-M. Now I will embed the whole discussion or the results of TETS-M in a broader discussion. So I will start with a survey of professional knowledge of mathematics teachers. I will then describe the design and structure of the TETS-M study. I will very shortly present results of the TETS-M study focused on lower secondary teachers. I will then describe a follow-up study we have carried out, so-called TETS-FU. I will describe very short results, and I will close with further perspectives, study so-called TETS-Instruct. So if we now look at what do we know on the professional knowledge of mathematics teachers, and I have put deliberately mathematics in brackets because these studies were done using mathematics or based on mathematics teachers, but of course there is the idea that these results hold for other teacher education professions too. Since the late 90s, there is a growing number of studies. Teacher education, many started with case studies, and quite often they were done in their own institutions. And if we look on milestones in the last 15 years, then we can say, look, there is first of all the survey study on teacher education, which was presented at ICMI in 2004, and which was afterwards published by Evan and Ball. And of course, then we have this International Handbook of Mathematics Teacher Education, edited by Terry Wood and others, which was published in 2008 and still presents the state of the art. And these two big studies or handbooks really filled many gaps concerning the efficiency of mathematics teaching. So now look at current congresses coming up. It's not the case as it was 10 years ago that teacher education and empirical research only plays a minor role. If we now go to a conference, teacher education plays a huge role and usually have a huge bunch of papers. So, and of course many of these studies are small-scale studies, but there are a growing number of large-scale studies too. So, and if we now try to characterize these studies coming up, you can characterize them amongst others by a more analytical approach. That means you distinguish different facets of knowledge which is functional for teaching. I hope it becomes more clear what I mean by that afterwards. These kind of approaches, they stress the importance of knowledge, of content knowledge, in our case mathematics knowledge, and they have as common the notion of competency. And this competency oriented approaches are of course connected and taken from the PISA study and other studies around, which start with a competency approach. And of course they emphasize a bit more what Schoenfeld and Jeremy Kilpatrick described very clearly. They said they describe teaching as a knowledge-intensive domain. So it means whenever you are teaching, you need a lot of teaching, and they described the proficiency in teaching as something which is so important as a goal for teacher education. And they already distinguish two aspects which are important: knowledge and effective motivational facets. That means both aspects are important in order to become a good teacher. So, and there are, if we think about this characterization, there are actually 3 large-scale studies around which share this common theoretical orientation. It is first of all, as the already mentioned TETS-M study. It is secondly, of course, a study very well known in Chile, but not only in Chile, all over the world. It's a study Mathematical Knowledge for Teaching by the Learning Mathematics for Teaching group at the University of Michigan. And I know that many of their items had been translated into Spanish and are used over here. All and Hyman Berths developed. And it is another one, a German large-scale study developed in the core or in the frame of the PISA study, namely the cognitive activity in the classroom project by, and amongst others, Werner Blum was participating and leading this project. And TETS-M and Coactive, they both share this classification of the knowledge facets developed by Schurman, and I will come back to this classification. Whereas the mathematical knowledge for teaching focus much more strongly on several facets of knowledge teaching, especially the mathematical part as well as the pedagogical part. So, what we now have as the current situation when it comes to the theoretical framework for teacher education? I mean, it's not so eminent important to emphasize it once, because I mean, we all have heard from the seminal work of Lee Schurman and his description of pedagogical content knowledge. I think you all have read this very famous phrase where he described the pedagogical content knowledge as the special amalgam of content and pedagogy that is uniquely the province of teachers, their own special form of professional understanding. I think there are not so many quotes around in math education which have been quoted so often, and this one. Although it's not clear how far until now what you understand by PCK, and I will in the following use for pedagogical content knowledge PCK. So how do you describe PCK, and how do you evaluate it empirically, and what kind of facets, sub-facets it really covers? There is a very nice survey paper by Fien de Pape, Lieben Verschaffen, Heino Kelchtermans in 2013, and it's a general paper, but it has a strong emphasis on education. Oh, sorry, education is meant. So, and they describe very clearly the different notions on the conceptualization of PCK, and referring to very important work of Tim Rowland and Ken Ruthven. They describe two different paradigms concerning the conceptualization of PCK, and I have gone back to the original work. Rowland and Ruthven said, look, whether mathematical knowledge in teaching is located in the head of the individual teacher, in the head, or somehow a social asset, only in the context of patients, is of course very important. And it's until now an undecided question. And De Pape and others then said these two different ways, two different perspectives, PCK have central consequences, yes, on the how you evaluate it and how you describe it. First of all, you have some kind of cognitive perspective in which you identify a limited number of components to be part of PCK, and you distinguish PCK from other categories of teaching knowledge base. So you have this, this kind of analytic approach which you really can separate these different components of the professional knowledge of teachers. And situated perspective in where you describe PCK as multidimensional, and teachers' choices simultaneously reflect mathematical and pedagogical deliberations. That means, as a teacher, you cannot only decide on make a mathematical decision. You always have to bear in mind pedagogical reflections too. So, and I mean, it's already obvious that that both approaches are necessary. I mean, it's obvious that both parts are necessary. And I will come back to that later on. That is actually the kind of theoretical frame I would like to unfold over here. So these two different ways of describing PCK has strong consequences for the way how you investigate it. If you are coming from a cognitive perspective, then you measure PCK independently from the classroom context, and it independently from other components, and afterwards you are interested how PCK relates, for example, with the mathematical knowledge or the general pedagogical knowledge, or for example with other kind of. So you separate very clearly an analysis. If you come from the situated perspective, then you assume that PCK makes sense within context, which is enacted, and you already see that the terminology is changing dramatically. Enactment is something which really makes more sense in such a kind of an environment. So therefore the studies usually refer on class, and of course you have other data sources and something similarly. And the paper, of course, both perspectives are needed, and both perspectives have pitfalls, and both have shortcomings, but of course both have advantages. So, and in the following I would like, that is the underlying idea of my talk, I would like to show you a bunch or a triad of empirical studies around the TEDS-M study, in which we try to integrate these both kinds of research. So I will start with the TEDS-M study, which is a cognitively oriented study. I will go on with the TEDS follow-up study, which is much. I will close perspectives on a study we are trying out, TEDS Instruct, in which we are even trying to get even closer to classroom activities. So that is the whole idea behind. TEDS-M. It is, we mentioned it, it was carried out under the auspices of the IEA. These are the two German books we published. Everybody who is able to read German is highly welcome to read it. We have published a Springer book out of that. We mean Sigrid Blömige, Feng-Shui Xi, and William Schmidt and myself. And in there you find a lot of detailed analysis on the TEDS-M study, which is going far beyond what IEA has published so far. And especially you will find, because Feng-Shui was really doing a lot of research in Taiwan, so we will find a lot of possible explanations about the high performance of the Taiwanese students. I mean, that's what we all would have expected, and it was the case. So you will find not only descriptions, but explanations. And I mean, that is much more interesting for us. So, that is actually, I mean, we can say that a TEDS-M study was the first large-scale study with direct testing with graduates from 16 countries, actually 17 countries, 16 in primary study and 16 in the secondary study. And tested were prospective or future teachers in their final year of teacher education. So we really wanted to find out, what do future teachers know when they leave the teacher education institution? And that is of course quite different what teacher education institution means in several parts of the world. So the first study is the primary study. That means all future teachers participate who want to get a license to teach mathematics in grade 1 through 4. And of course here you have mainly generalists like we have here in Chile. And that is actually true for most parts of the world. There are a few exceptions, like for example Thailand, but not many. So, and then you have the specialists. That means the future teachers who want to get a license to teach mathematics in grade 8. It means that is mainly lower secondary study. And these two studies, and there were actually really two studies, they followed this very rigorous standards from the IAA concerning sampling procedures and so on, and coding and data analysis. So 23,000 future teachers participated, so you can imagine it was really quite a lot, and the results were released in 2010. And actually you can use all the data, they are released. The problem is that only the data are released, not the items. And I mean, as a math educator, I say, what do I do with data if I don't know what the items are? There are about 20 items released. I can send that to you if you are interested, but I mean, that does not really help you to reanalyze the data. They are reanalyzed, but if you don't have instruments. And that is not a question I can solve. It is the IAA decided we want to carry out further studies, so we will not release the items. So there were actually 3 multi-layered main questions of TEDS-M, and I will focus on the first one, namely the professional competencies of future mathematics teachers. Then, how distinctive are the institutional conditions of mathematics teacher education, and what are the national conditions? So you are getting more and more general. Third, the starting point of TEDS-M are teaching abilities, so-called professional competencies. And in TEDS-M we refer to the very famous psychologist not define as the need in order to cope with the activities in school, that means teaching students. And he divided professional competence into cognitive facets, that is the teacher's professional knowledge, and the effective motivational facets, that means the professional beliefs. And he even said that competencies are not only the ability to do something, but even the willingness to do something. It's important that somebody has not only the ability to something, somebody has the willingness to really do it. And that is, of course, as we all know, an important distinction. Then, of course, we go back to the seminal work of Lee Schurman, in where we distinguish the professional knowledge of teachers into content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, and here curricular knowledge is included. You may know that in several classifications Schurman had curricular knowledge as an own facet. We have integrated that, and then the general pedagogical knowledge. And then concerning the professional beliefs, in particular epistemological beliefs, it means about the nature of the subject taught and about the beliefs about the teaching and learning of this subject. So you may have seen this kind of classification. You have the teacher competencies, and here they have the cognitive abilities, and here you have the affective motivational characteristics. And you can imagine that you are can carry out a lot of interesting relational analysis between these different facets. So, yes, concerning instruments, a lot of instruments were used, not only a very extensive the professional knowledge of future teachers, but extensive document analysis, and especially many courses at university analyzed. And that is very important, because when you say we want to find out how effective teacher education is, you need to have some kind of measurement stick or some kind of benchmark. And the benchmark was the affective motivational facet and their cognitive proficiency or the cognitive knowledge. So it means how well, for example, students evaluated the teaching and learning of mathematics and how well they performed in that was taken as measurement point. And of course you can strongly question that, because there are definitely other criteria around. So, and then we have that Germany, or the situation that Germany, Chinese Taipei and the USA assessed the general pedagogical in a more extensive way. That means we took half an hour to evaluate that, and it was an instrument developed by Johannes König and Blömecke. So in order to make it a little bit more lively, I brought a few items with me, and one is from the mathematical knowledge. Domain is algebra, so of course it is secondary level, because I will concentrate on the secondary study. It's about reasoning, and it's a very easy proof question. You should prove the following. You have graphs of linear functions, and the question is if when they intersect at a special point, of their sum function must also go through this special point. If you look at this item, I mean, it sounds a little bit more complicated as it really is. If you make a drawing, then it is perfectly clear. So the answer would be, we didn't expect very careful steps of a proof in a general way, although you could have expected that. I mean, these are teachers or future teachers, but we would have really be satisfied with something like, suppose f from x and gx intersect at point p0 on the x-axis, then you have f from p equals 0, g from p equals 0, therefore the sum function is 0 too. So I mean that it's very easy and informal way of arguing, and of course directly derived from the area of PCK geometry, from the area of planning, and it's a level item. I had used that in secondary too, and when the question is as follows: teaching children about length measurements for the first time, Miss Ho, and third the name of your country, Miss Müller, prefers to begin by their book using paper clicks, then again using pencils. Give 2 reasons she could have for preferring to do that rather than simply teaching the children how to use a ruler. I mean, you can imagine it's a little bit more ambitious, and we would have expected the following 2 reasons, or 3 reasons we have given. Understanding of, you want to promote the understanding of what measurement is. The need, you want to show the student the need for a standard unit, and of course you want to show the student that it's necessary for appropriate unit. So there are definitely more reasons behind, but that could be the 3 reasons you have. If we now look at the results, as already said, there are detailed results available. And I will concentrate on the secondary study. Primary study is similar, but there are some kind of interesting distinctions which I cannot elaborate in detail due to the time pressure, because I want to come to the follow-up study. So that are the results, some kind of like the league table, or horse race table. So you look at the future lower secondary teachers and their content knowledge. And I mean, let's start with the top. Not unexpected, Taiwanese students are outperforming all the others. It's really, I mean, if you look, so the international mean was 500, standard deviation was 100. So you see, the Taiwanese students are even outperforming, nearly by 1 standard deviation, the Singapore students. Interesting that the Russian students are doing very well, the Polish students too, and Germany was, to our big surprise, only a little bit above the mean, and it is a significant difference to the USA, but it's not big. And if we now come to the bottom, Chile was the only South American country which participated, who was strong enough or dared to do that. I have no idea how the others would have performed. I mean, it's definitely the case. I mean, who dares to do that and see afterwards, oh, wonderful, you're at the bottom, congratulations. I mean, that is nothing you like to hear. I mean, Germany was not very pleased to be there. So, I mean, okay. So you see that Chile is quite strong behind all the others. Botswana was the only country from Africa who participated, but I've just learned that Botswana spends a lot of money in education, so their good performance is really remarkable. What is interesting, if we look at Norway, I mean, they are spending unbelievable high amount of money in education. It's one of the richest countries you have in the world. So that they knew it in advance that their teachers would be very poor in mathematics. It has child-centered approaches. Mathematics is not important as long as you are centered towards the child. So, but for something for which the math educators in Norway really had waited, because then they could really say, look, we had told you that, now you see it. So now let's look at the pedagogical content knowledge. Yes, you see mean as well, 500. You see Taiwan is outperforming the others still. I mean, it's a little less strong, but it's still remarkably higher. I mean, 1.5 standard deviation above the mean. I mean, so Russia is still doing very well. Singapore is doing well. Switzerland is close to Singapore, and the German students have really made at least happy about that. And you see that Chile has made more progress. They are close to 400, but there is still some kind of difference to the others, although the differences are smaller. So there is a very strong emphasis on pedagogical content knowledge. I mean, that are really the good news. So I don't want to go into more detail about TEDS-M, because I'm going to present more results tomorrow. I shouldn't repeat too many. Show tomorrow more items the Chilean students for several selected items. And we can discuss tomorrow about the... Now I want to, because I said we cognitively oriented study, namely TEDS-M, and how to become more situated. So we have, after TEDS-M was over, we have implemented a follow-up study of TEDS-M, so-called TEDS-FU, immediately after we had published our results. And the main question was, first of all, how does the professional knowledge or the professional competencies of future teachers develop in their first year of the teaching profession? So how does their professional knowledge of early career teachers develop using the instruments of TEDS-M? And we were in the good position that we could use. We are allowed to use the instruments. I'm unfortunately not able to give you the instruments. I was even not allowed to give these instruments to Macarena. So, and that is very important. I will go into detail tomorrow in the one talk about video tomorrow. How can professional competencies of teachers be analyzed in a more performance-oriented way? So, and of course, how does the expertise of teacher develops? I have to hurry up a little bit. Yes, we started with the expertise approach. Here's a book I have edited with Yeping Li, and there we described what expertise means, or proficiency, as Schoenfeld and Kilpatrick called it. And they said, look, the high professional of teachers is described by a high degree of the integration of knowledge, and this knowledge has multiple links to each other, and a modified categorical perception of the teaching situation, and an increasing integration of the different dimensions. So the different facets of the professional knowledge of teachers, the competency of the teachers more integrated. And especially Schoenfeld and Kilpatrick said, what does it mean for the math pedagogical content knowledge? It means an increase in the conceptual understanding as you are becoming more and more proficient, as you are becoming master teacher, then you have an increased conceptual understanding, you have a better repertoire of heuristic strategies, and you have metacognitive control strategies, increasing competence through teaching, and of course the knowledge about school mathematics increases in depth and in width. So these are claims which are partly based on empirical studies and partly based on claims. And we reaffirm that. We have not until now not published all the results, but a few. And because we wanted to come closer to this practice-oriented, situated facet, we took up the very famous approach of noticing, and I know that are now discussed over the world. In 2000, when we started to work with a noticing concept, it was not so famous, and noticing takes up an action-oriented or instrumental point of view. And this action-oriented view on competence was complemented with the knowledge-based facets of TEDS-M. So here you see the integration of the situated and the cognitive oriented point on or view on competence. So we have developed three different facets of noticing. We have gone back to the early work of the group around Berliner and Carter. Have developed, of course, a lot of work about noticing, and if you are interested in current concepts on noticing, I would refer you to the very interesting survey paper in this book by Shireen Jacobs and Philip. And we describe or distinguish different facets of noticing: perceiving particular events in a structural setting, or as Shireen and others call it, attending to particular events. We have called it perceiving, Carter and Berliner solution. Then the interpreting of perceived activities in the classroom, or as Shireen and others call it, making sense of the instructional setting. And the facet is decision making, either as anticipating a response on the teacher's activities or as proposing alternative instructional strategies. And especially Erickson in this book from Shireen and others emphasized that without this last decision-making component, the whole noticing concept would not be of interest. But most other, for example, the approach by Van Ees and the original approach by Shireen, they only had these two facets over there. So there is a lot of discussion around what really noticing is, and you have to be always very precise what you think about what noticing is, and we described it like that. So it means seeing something, interpret in, and make a decision. So, as already said, FU was carried out from 2010 to 2013. We had a web-based test. Web-based testing was quite complicated. Nowadays it's much easier. And we had asked the teachers who originally participated in TEDS-M, primary and secondary, to be tested on a voluntary basis. So actually we have a longitudinal study of 171 teachers from the secondary cohort and 130 teachers from the primary cohort. Originally we had something about 1,800 future teachers, so it's of course a strong decrease. On the other hand, I mean, that was they didn't need to participate, it was optional for them. And I mean, if we ever have tried to convince teachers to participate in the testing, you know what that means. So we were quite happy with this study, although we know, maybe I should already say that, we know that these were the better teachers, because you could simply look at the achievements in TEDS-M, that was the better part. So the future teachers who were fed up didn't participate. And the important aspect that we evaluated the professional competencies of the teachers using video vignettes with short teaching sequences, and we dealt amongst others with effective classroom management. I mean, that is very important, heterogeneity, individualization, teaching strategies, of course the continuation of teaching sequences with possible teaching options. And what is important, we used scripted video in order to be quite precise. So the design of the study, and you see it, quite ambitious. We had an online questionnaire on beliefs, professional satisfaction, school experiences. Then we had tests with these 3 video vignettes where we asked them questions to the classroom video concerning MPCK, mathematical pedagogical content knowledge, and general pedagogy. And we had 3 video vignettes, and I will show you the fourth one in a minute. Then we had a time-limited test where we evaluated error cognition under time pressure. Quite interesting results coming up. And then we had, in a digitalized way, the original paper and tensor tests from TEDS-M. That means we reduced the mathematical content knowledge items, we mainly kept the MPCK items, and we reduced strongly the GPK items. So actually each test component took something about 2 hours. So we asked the teachers always to have a break in between, and that one was something about half an hour. So I mean, you can imagine that it was really quite exhausting for the teachers. So I will show you the example of a shortened video vignette. The fourth one we actually then haven't used. In the video vignette, a sequence from a mathematics classroom is shown. Comprehensive school in Hamburg, and the abilities of the students are quite heterogeneous. And the mathematical background is as follows. The task dealt the following, you all know that. On the farm there are geese and cows. Altogether there are 105 animals, and there are 4 times as much geese than cows on the farm. And the question is, how many geese and how many cows are on the farm? So, we don't have a sound over here, but I mean we have, or do you have sound? But we didn't. Because we have English subtitles, so but if we have sound, it always sounds a bit more natural.
It looks a little bit complicated, but
Okay.
can you put it louder in your
No, that is the.
I'll just here.
Yes, but I think that is the hardest we all.
No, look here.
Oh, okay. Oh. Can you do it?
Yes.
Start once more. So once, I mean, you mainly should concentrate on the subtitles. Okay, I mean that's it. Something about... Yes, it's the only one. So I think it doesn't make any sense to have it. Yes, okay. So, results. Or first of all, evaluation instruments. We have used a lot of Likert scales and open items, and the main reason for using Likert scales was, of course, that you receive a lot of data points immediately with a few questions. And we have evaluated CK and GPK, as already said with the video, and we had Likert scales concerning MPCK, concerning perceiving and interpreting. That means you had to assess the student's answers from a mathematical point of view. I mean, it was obvious what he should say. Then open items concerning the decision making. It was obvious that, I mean, the class was really behaving very badly. I mean, that was made up. We wanted it like that. So, and the teacher didn't react. So what could you do in order to prevent these disturbances by the students? Then we had open items concerning perceiving and interpreting. That means rephrasing students' argument, and of course the students' misconceptions on variables. So, and of course the background you have already, of course, immediately recognized. That is this very well-known misconceptions of variables, which was first published by Rosnick and Clement. And you understand a variable as an entity and not as a quantity of the entity. And you could even say that see that your teachers was allowing this wrong formulation, because 105 is the cows and the geese all together, and not the number of cows and the number of geese. So we should find out teaching in its wrong usage, which was already provoking this kind of misconception. So that is the background behind that, and yes, and we evaluated the results with very extensive. As you could see, I mean, these Likert scales are always easy to evaluate, more or less. But these open items are very complicated or time extensive to evaluate. So we had verbatim answers by test person, and I have brought one with me. So an example item was Kira's answer for G equals K is not correct if K refers to cows and G refers to geese. And actually we have, of course, let this not quite correct formulation over here in order not to show the teachers already where the errors is, because if you would have formulated here the number of cows and the number of geese, everybody would have known what you should answer. So you have to be here a little bit less precise as we wish to be. So Kira's answer is possibly based on a misconception of variables. Please describe this misconception. And an answer, a correct answer would have been, she translated the wording 4 times more geese, literally, in the mathematical language, rather than multiplying the number of cows. So she uses the variable as a mere substitute in the spoken language. So, I mean, that would have been a perfectly correct answer. Of course, other answers are possible too. So, results. What did we do? I mean, there are now results coming up. It always takes longer, as expected, to publish results. The issue 3 of the International Journal of Science and Math Education, there have just appeared 4 papers from TED's follow-up. So, and especially if your study in Math Education in 2016 will contain 4 more papers too. And there was one in teacher education. And then, of course, we have quite a few interesting papers in German, which, okay, I mean, most of you will not be able to read. So we have concentrated on secondary study. So, and the results are, yes, give interesting insight from our point of view on the structure and the development of the professional knowledge, professional competencies of early career teachers. So first of all, we looked at MCK, and maybe you remember that we had tested the same students at the end, or the students at the end of their teacher education and 4 years later as practicing teachers with the same instruments or only shortened instruments. And if you look now concerning the mathematical knowledge, if you look, yes, whether you can, whether the level of MCK has remained the same, then you will realize that there's first of all a significant decrease of the MCK. I mean, that is not unexpected because the students didn't use their mathematical knowledge as extensively as during their teacher study. MPCK remained mainly the same. That was a little bit unexpected for us because this MPCK is quite academic knowledge, so we had expected that they would forget it even as well, but it mainly remained on the same level. And of course you can interpret it in such a way that you can say, look, early career teachers learned the value of MPCK while they were teaching. I mean, that's the best thing which could happen. You really realize that what you have learned at university makes sense. So when we analyze the rank order, that means when you look who was good in mathematics at the end of teacher education and how he or she is performing 4 years later, then you receive quite interesting distinctions between MCK and MPCK. First of all, in MCK, the rank order remains nearly the same. That means who was good in math at the end of teacher education was good after 4 years as well. So no big changes happened. In MPCK, you had a really mixed result. That means there were early career teachers who remained at the same level. There were many who really decreased significantly, who were brilliant at the end and poor after 4 years, or the other way around. And of course we interpreted really in such a way that the professional competence of early career teachers is really still in the process of being reorganized. That means you need to learn how to use what you have learned in university, and you still reorganize it. And that's the reason why MPCK is changing, whereas MCK, university knowledge, is used less seldom. And when we think about what is the nature of teacher expertise, because we started from the extensive expertise framework, then we first of all have the knowledge facet coming from TETS-M, then perceiving, interpreting and acting, classroom situation, and then we had another facet, I mentioned, the speed of student error recognition. That means we showed teachers two right and wrong answers from students, common errors, and they had 5 seconds time to recognize it. I mean, 5 seconds is quite speed. So the question is, we had expected that this facet strongly relate to the noticing concept, because it is noticing. It is unfortunately the other, or however, it is the other way around. It means we can show that you have neither a content-related or pedagogical-oriented analysis, but it is the case that you can form one group of competence facets comprising MCK, MPCK and speed in error recognition, and you have the other group perceiving, interpreting and acting, and general pedagogical knowledge. So it was quite unexpected, and we are still trying to interpret that. I mean, there are interpretations around, but that gave us really a hard time to think about that. If you look at, for example, the general pedagogical knowledge, then you find that this perceiving of classroom situation, in interpreting are on the one hand connected, but they are still different dimensions. Of course, I mean, we can discuss about that afterwards, because that is, from my point of view, a very astonishing result too. And with general pedagogical knowledge, it's not the case that the rank order mainly remains the same. It is apparently reorganized during early career teachers too. It means future teachers who were poor in general pedagogy could become better, and the other way round. And the level of general pedagogy and the ability to interpret something is really strongly correlated, whereas in the facet of percepting something is not so strongly related to the general pedagogical knowledge. I mean, that is a very astonishing result from our point of view, but I think you can interpret that. So, if we now look at the nature of MPCK and GPK, and we had first of all, and that was how I started, this cognitively oriented digitalized paper and pencil test on mathematical content knowledge, math pedagogical content knowledge, and general pedagogical content. And you have this situated video-based test where you mainly have this noticing facets. And if you really look at some kind of more qualitatively oriented analysis, then you find out that it is really necessary to combine quantitative and qualitative analysis, because if you analyze these two different ways of analyzing teachers' competence in a qualitative way, then you find out that the situated and practice-oriented competence facets are much stronger related and have more commonalities. In contrast, if you analyze it more from the concept of a quantitative point of view, that means going stronger from this theory-based knowledge. It means it really shows that you actually really need, in order to say something about the nature of future teachers' competency, we really need a combination of quantitative methods, and you actually really need situated knowledge as well, or situated ways of evaluating professional knowledge of teachers. And only one last slide about, yes, how do we intend to continue, and we have already started that 1 year ago. It is the third part of this trias of the TED study, in where we try to connect professional knowledge or professional competencies of teachers with the growth of students' achievements. It's of course indeed really the test. It means we really want to see whether our instruments are really valid. So what we want to find out are relations between patterns of teachers' competence and promotion of students' learning. And what results we will receive. We have started in 2014. We are in the middle of data evaluation. We carry out in Hamburg as a metropolitan area with high number of migrant students. Something about 50% of our students have a migrant background. And we will go to Thuringia, which is a much more rural area, the former GDR. And we will use actually the framework of TED's follow-up, that means with the TED's M data, the noticing concept, and we really are looking forward to the question whether, yes, teachers' competence really are influential, or how influential teacher competence is for the promotion of students' learning. So I thank you very much for your attention, and of course hope to see you next year in Hamburg.
Thank you very much. There's some questions. Si alguien quiere preguntar en español.
Project uses video-based test also. But I don't know what they asked for the teacher. It was the same setting, noticing the coactive project.
Yes.
Used also this video-based test.
Yes, but they...
I don't know what knowledge of the teachers.
What they did was always the same. They showed a short teaching sequence and then they asked, how would you continue? And that was just with full richness of... I mean, the study in 2003, 2004, noticing was not really born as a concept. So, I mean, it is really impressive that starting to get results. They had difficulties in getting reliable results. But it was mainly, how would you continue? So that is more restricted. I get in the coming up ZDM issue, which will be published as first issue in 2016, there will be a paper by Stefan Kraus and Georg Bruckmeier and Werner Blum on exactly the results of this video study. The PhD study of Georg Bruckmeier is published, but it is in German. So. It was my pleasure.
Tal vez comentarios de algo que quieran comentar que se esté haciendo acá y que quieran como, no sé, saber su opinión, o si es que ella... No necesariamente tiene que ser una pregunta respecto de la presentación.
Actually, I do have a question.
It's a comment.
At some point you showed, I mean, a possible explanation of why the difference when you compare like the improvement of the mathematical concept knowledge versus the mathematical pedagogical concept knowledge, no?
Mm-hmm.
The MPCK. And the possible explanation was that maybe the reason was that the teachers don't really use that much the MPK versus the MPCK.
Mm-hmm.
Yes? But could it be also another explanation that the teachers don't get very good preparation in MPCK than in MPK in the teacher in service instruction?
Mm-hmm. I think that is a possible explanation, but the study took place in Germany, and we know that our future teachers learn a lot about MPCK, and especially we have in Germany two kinds of phases of teacher education. First, you are 5 years at a university, and afterwards you go 1.5 years at a so-called seminar, teacher seminar, where you are in a school teaching and you are trained 3 to 4 times a week concerning math pedagogy. So I mean, they had to have the chance to learn a lot about math pedagogy. I mean, otherwise I can see that this is really definitely a good explanation, but because that took place in Germany, the study, I would not be so strongly convinced by that explanation. Okay. But in other parts of the world, that could definitely be possible. I mean, we don't know how it is. We can only develop explanations. Yes, thank you very much. Okay. Yeah. And if you wish to have the PowerPoint, I can send it to you and you can distribute it as you wish.